Edward scolded the twins severely, but told Gordon it served him right. Gordon was furious.
But his driver said, "No, what would Sir Topham Hatt say if we were late?" Every time he met another engine, he would say, "I want to fish." But they all had the same answer. "Engines don't go fishing." Silly stick in the muds, thought Thomas. One day, he stopped as usual to take in water at the station by the river. Out of order. "Bother," said Thomas. "I'm thirsty." "Never mind," said his driver. "We'll get some water from the river." Suddenly, Thomas began to feel a pain in his boiler. Steam began to hiss from his safety valve in an alarming way. "There's too much steam," said his driver. "Oh dear," groaned Thomas. "I'm going to burst. I'm going to burst." They damped down his fire and struggled on. "I've got such a pain. I've got such a pain," Thomas hissed. Duck, the Great Western engine, worked hard in the yard at the big station. Sometimes he pulled coaches. Sometimes he pushed freight cars, but whatever the work, Duck got the job done without fuss. One day, Duck was resting in the shed when Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "Your work in the yard has been good. Would you like to have a branch line for your own?" "Yes, please, sir," replied Duck. So Duck took charge of his new branch line. The responsibility delighted him. Duck felt his responsibility deeply and talked endlessly about it. "You don't understand, Donald, how much Sir Topham Hatt relies on me." "Ach, aye," muttered Donald sleepily. "I'm Great Western, and I—" "Quack, quack, quack." "What?" "Ye heard? Quack, quack, ye go. Sounds like ye'd an egg laid. Now wheesht and let an engine sleep." "Quack yourself," said Duck indignantly. Later, he spoke to his driver. "Donald says I quack, as if I'd laid an egg." "Quack, do you?" pondered his fireman. He whispered something to Duck and his driver. They were going to play a joke on Donald and pay him back for teasing Duck. The engines were busy for the rest of the day and nothing more was said. But when at last Donald was asleep, Duck's driver and fireman popped something into his water tank. Next morning, when Donald stopped for water, he found that he had an unexpected passenger aboard. A small white duckling popped out of his water tank. "Now, who's behind this?" laughed Donald. The duckling was tame. That night, Donald's driver and fireman got busy. And in the morning, when Duck's crew arrived to look him over, they laughed and laughed. "Look, Duck, look what's under your bunker. It's a nest box with an egg in it." Donald opened a sleepy eye. Well, 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 ye must have laid it in the night, Duck, all unbeknownst." Then Duck laughed, too. "You win, Donald. It'd take a clever engine to get the better of you." Henry and Gordon were lonely when Thomas left the yard to run his branch line. Poor James, feeling quite giddy, rolled off to the shed without a word. That night, the three engines had an indignation meeting. "It's shameful to treat tender engines like this. Gordon has to go backwards, and people think he's a tank engine. James spins round like a top, and everyone laughs at us. And to add to that, Sir Topham Hatt makes us all shunt in dirty sidings. Ugh!" "Listen," said Gordon. He whispered something to the others. "We'll do it tomorrow. Sir Topham Hatt will look silly." The engines had decided to go on strike. He found Gordon, James, and Henry looking very cross. "Come along, Henry. It's time your train was ready." "Henry's not going," said Gordon. "We won't shunt like little tank engines. That was Thomas's job. We're important tender engines. You fetch our coaches and we will pull them. Tender engines don't shunt." "We'll see about that," said Sir Topham Hatt. "No engine on my railway is too important for small jobs." And he hurried away to find Edward. The yard has never been the same since Thomas left to run his branch line, he thought sadly. Gordon, James, and Henry were cold, lonely, and miserable. They wished now they hadn't been so silly. Henry, James, and Gordon were miserable. They had been shut up for several days for being naughty and longed to be let out again. At last, Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "I hope you are sorry," he said, "and that you understand that every job on the railway is important. We have a new tank engine called Percy, who helps pull coaches, and Thomas and Edward have worked the main line nicely. But I will let you out now if you promise to work hard." "Yes, sir," said the three engines, "we will." "That's good. But please remember that this no shunting nonsense must stop." Sir Topham Hatt then told Percy, Edward, and Thomas that they could go and play on the branch line for a few days. One day, Edward was talking to Trevor when Douglas steamed by. He was pulling a train of heavy coal cars. "Come on, Edward. Stop gossiping in the sun when there's work to be done." "That was a near thing." "We've had worse," replied Oliver, and they forged ahead. It was daylight when their journey ended. "We're home!" cried Douglas. "Shh!" said his driver. "There are the works. We'll find a place for Oliver." Oliver said goodbye and thank you, and Douglas puffed away. The next day, Douglas told the other engines all about Oliver. "Sir Topham Hatt will have to know," said James. "Douglas should tell him at once," added Gordon. "Well, here he is," said a voice. "Now, what's this all about?" "Beg pardon, sir, but we do need another engine." "Yes, sir," ventured Gordon. "A steam engine, sir." "Well, unless one is saved from scrap, there's little hope." "But, sir, one has." "Yes, indeed. And thanks to you, Douglas, he is now at our works. Oliver is just what we need for Duck's branch line." Everyone cheered. Now Oliver and Toad are mended and painted in full Great Western colors. Duck and Oliver are happy on their branch line. The others laughed at first and called it the Little Western. Duck and Oliver were delighted, and so the Little Western it will always be. Gordon was cross. "Why should Henry have a new shape?" he grumbled. "A shape good enough for me is good enough for him. He goes gallivanting off, leaving us to do his work, and comes back saying how happy he feels. It's disgraceful. And there's another thing. Henry whistles too much. No respectable engine ever whistles loudly at stations. It isn't wrong, but we just don't do it." Poor Henry didn't feel happy anymore. "Never mind," whispered Percy. "I'm glad you're home again. I like your whistling." "Goodbye, Henry," called Gordon. "We're glad to have you with us again, but remember what I said." Meanwhile, Gordon screeched along the line. The noise was awful. At the station, everyone covered their ears. Sir Topham Hatt covered his ears, too. "Take him away," he bellowed, "and stop that noise." Gordon puffed sadly away. But he wouldn't stop whistling until two fitters climbed up and knocked his whistle valve in place. That night, Gordon slunk into the shed. He was glad it was empty. "It isn't wrong," murmured Henry to no one in particular, "but we just don't do it." No one mentioned whistles. Next morning, Henry was enjoying himself enormously. "I feel so well, I feel so well," he sang. "Trickety-trock, trickety-trock," hummed his coaches. Lots of people were waiting at the station just before the bridge. They wanted to see what would happen. "Henry has plenty of ashes," said the driver. "Please keep all windows shut till we've passed the bridge. Henry's as excited as we are, aren't you, old fellow?" Henry felt more stuffed up than excited. "Well done, Henry," laughed his driver. Henry went home, hoping that next time he saw Gordon and the boys, they would have learned not to be so mean. One day, Thomas was at the junction when Gordon shuffled in with some freight cars. "Phew," remarked Thomas. "What a funny smell." "Can you smell a smell?" "I can't smell a smell," said Annie. "A funny, musty sort of smell," said Thomas. "No one noticed it till you did," grunted Gordon. "It must be yours." Not long ago, he had fallen into a dirty ditch. Thomas enjoyed teasing him about it. "Annie, Clarabelle, do you know what I think it is? It's ditch water." Before Gordon could answer, Thomas puffed away. Annie and Clarabelle could hardly believe their ears. "He's dreadfully rude. I feel quite ashamed. I feel quite ashamed. He's dreadfully rude." And to Thomas they said, "You mustn't be rude. You make us ashamed." But Thomas didn't care a bit. "That was funny. That was funny," he chuckled. He felt very pleased with himself. Annie and Clarabelle were deeply shocked. They had great respect for Gordon, the big engine. Thomas left the coaches at the station and went off to a mine for some cars. Gordon was resting in the siding. Sometimes he thought, "It's really tiring to be such a large and splendid engine. One does have to keep up appearances so." "Beep, beep, beep, beep. Hello, lazy bones," whistled Henry. "What cheek," spluttered Gordon. "That Henry is too big for his wheels. Fancy speaking to me like that. Me, who has never had an accident." "Aren't jammed whistles and burnt safety valves accidents?" asked Percy innocently. "No, indeed. High spirits. Might happen to any engine. But to come off the rails like Henry did, well, I ask you, is that right? Is it decent?" Then it was Henry's turn to take the express. Gordon watched him getting ready. Be careful, Henry. You're not pulling the flying kipper now. Mind you keep on the rails today. Henry went off in a huff, and Gordon yawned and went to sleep. But not for long. Wake up, Gordon, said his driver. A special train's coming, and we're to pull it. Is it coaches or freight cars? Cars, said his driver. Cars, said Gordon. Gordon's fire was slow to start, so Edward had to push Gordon to the turntable to get him facing the right way. I won't go! I won't go! Grumbled Gordon. Don't be silly! Don't be silly! Puffed Edward. Late that night, Gordon crawled home, a sadder and wiser engine.
Toby the tram engine has cow catchers and side plates. They help to prevent animals from getting hurt if they should stray onto the line. Daisy thought Toby's fenders were silly. You're afraid of getting hurt yourself, she flounced. I'm not, huffed Toby. You are? I've not got stupid cow catchers, but I'm not frightened. I'd just toot and they'd all go away. But they don't, said Toby simply. They would with me. Animals always run if you toot and look them in the eye. Even bulls, said Daisy confidently. Daisy had never met a bull, but she purred away quite unconcerned. She tooted at a farm crossing and a horse and cart halted while she went by. Pooh, she said. It's easy, I just toot and they all stand aside. Poor little Toby, I'm sorry he's frightened. At the next station, a policeman was waiting. There's a bull on the line, he warned. Please persuade it to return to the farmer. Daisy was excited. Now, she thought, I'll show Toby how to manage bulls. Toby was bemused and amused to see her back in the station so soon. Bulls always run away if you toot and look 'em in the eye, eh, Daisy? Daisy stayed silent. Ah, well, continued Toby, we can live and learn. I'd better chase him away for you, I suppose. He clanked away to find Champion.
The signalman climbed a telegraph pole. The station master paced the platform, passengers fussed, and Thomas seized impatiently. 10 minutes late. I warned him, passengers will complain, and the Fat Controller. The signalman shouted. The station master stood amazed, the passengers exclaimed and laughed as Percy approached. Sorry, I'm late, Percy panted. So I should hope, scolded Thomas, but he spoilt the effect as Percy drew alongside. Look what's crawled out of the hay, he chortled. What's wrong? Asked Percy. Talk about hairy caterpillars, puffed Thomas as he started away. It's worth being late to have seen you. Thomas told Toby all about it.